The old mansion stood shrouded in darkness at the end of the winding, overgrown path. Its crumbling facade bore witness to centuries of secrets, and the whispered rumors of the townsfolk painted it as a place cursed by the very earth it sat upon. No one knew the truth of its history, but everyone had heard the tales of tragic deaths, vengeful spirits, and a dead man's wish that haunted the place. It was a moonless night when David, a young and adventurous man, decided to investigate the mansion. He had always been drawn to the supernatural and had heard the legends surrounding the house since childhood. Armed with a flashlight and a heart full of curiosity, he set out on a journey that would change his life forever. The path leading to the mansion was overgrown with gnarled trees, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers to ensnare any intruders. The air was heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. David couldn't help but shiver as he pushed through the brush, guided only by the dim beam of his flashlight. As he approached the mansion, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to thicken, and David's heart raced in his chest. The mansion loomed before him like a dark sentinel guarding its secrets. The windows were shattered, and the doors hung askew on rusty hinges. It was as though the very building itself had given up on life, waiting for something to set it free. David cautiously stepped over the threshold and into the foyer, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air inside was damp and musty, and the walls were adorned with faded wallpaper that depicted scenes from a bygone era. Cobwebs clung to the corners, as if the spiders themselves were the only living creatures that still resided within. The first room he entered was a grand parlor, its once opulent furniture now covered in tattered sheets. David couldn't help but wonder about the people who had once lived here. What had driven them away, leaving this place to crumble into decay? He had heard the stories of a family that had met a tragic end within these walls, but the details were always hazy, shrouded in superstition and fear. David's footsteps echoed through the empty rooms as he explored further. He passed through a dining room with a long oak table set for a meal that would never be eaten again. The kitchen was equally eerie, with rusted pots and pans hanging from hooks, as though the cook had simply walked away one day and never returned. The mansion seemed to stretch on forever, its hallways twisting and turning like a labyrinth. David felt a growing sense of unease as he delved deeper into its depths. It was as though the very walls were watching him, their secrets whispering in his ear. Finally, David entered what appeared to be a library. The shelves were lined with books, their pages yellowed with age. He ran his fingers along the spines, feeling a strange connection to the knowledge contained within. As he scanned the titles, one caught his eye: The Dead Man's Wit. David pulled the book from the shelf and opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, detailing the history of the mansion and the tragic events that had occurred there. It spoke of a man named Samuel Holloway, the original owner of the mansion, who had made a wish on his deathbed, a wish that had cursed the house for all eternity. According to the notes, Samuel had been a wealthy and powerful man, known for his ruthless business dealings and his insatiable thirst for power. As he lay dying, racked with guilt and regret, he had made a desperate plea to the forces beyond the mortal realm. He had wished for immortality, to continue his pursuit of wealth and power beyond the confines of death itself. But every wish comes at a price, and Samuel's was no exception. The note spoke of strange happenings in the mansion after his death, apparitions, mysterious deaths, and an unrelenting sense of dread that hung in the air like a curse. It was said that Samuel's restless spirit haunted the mansion, forever trapped in a liminal state between life and death. David was captivated by the story, unable to tear his eyes away from the pages. He felt a strange compulsion, as though something within the mansion was drawing him deeper into its web. He knew he should leave, that he was trespassing in a place that held dark secrets, but he couldn't bring himself to turn away. As he read on, David became aware of a subtle change in the room. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to come alive, swirling and coalescing into a form. He looked up from the book to see a figure standing before him, a figure that seemed both ethereal and solid. A wraith-like presence in the dim light of the library. It was Samuel Holloway himself, his spectral form dressed in the finery of a bygone era. His eyes bore into David's, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He spoke in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the underworld. "You have discovered my story, young one," he said, his voice dripping with bitterness. "I made a wish in this very room, a wish for immortality. But it was a curse in disguise, for I am trapped here for all eternity, unable to move on to the afterlife." David's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the ghostly figure before him. He had heard of ghosts, but he had never believed in them until now. He was face to face with the restless spirit of Samuel Holloway, a man whose greed and ambition had bound him to this place. "I didn't mean to intrude," David stammered, his voice barely more than a whisper. Samuel's spectral form seemed to waver, and his eyes softened ever so slightly. "You have the power to break my curse," he said, his voice pleading. "I have watched over this mansion for centuries, unable to find peace. But if you are willing to help me, there may be a way to release me from this torment." David's curiosity overcame his fear, and he nodded hesitantly. "What must I do?" Samuel explained that his curse could only be broken by finding his lost journal, a journal that contained the details of the wish he had made on his deathbed. It was hidden somewhere within the mansion, and he had been unable to find it in all his years of searching. With a sense of trepidation, David agreed to help. He knew it wouldn't be an easy task, but the thought of freeing Samuel from his torment compelled him to try. The ghostly figure led him through the mansion, guiding him to hidden passages and secret chambers. The mansion seemed to shift and change around them, as though it were alive and conspiring to keep its secrets hidden. As they searched, David couldn't help but feel the weight of the mansion's history pressing down on him. He saw glimpses of the past, scenes of opulence and decadence, of parties and celebrations, and of a man consumed by his own greed. It was as though the very walls of the mansion were showing him the truth of Samuel Holloway's life. Days turned into weeks as David and the ghostly figure searched the mansion from top to bottom. They encountered strange phenomena, objects moving on their own, ghostly apparitions, and a sense of being watched at all times. But David was determined to find the journal and put an end to the curse that bound Samuel to the mansion. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber in the basement. The walls were lined with shelves of old books and scrolls, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal with a leather-bound journal resting upon it. David's heart leapt with excitement as he realized they had found what they were looking for. He carefully opened the journal and began to read the entries within. It detailed Samuel's life, his rise to power, and the moment of his death. The final entry chronicled his desperate wish for immortality and the realization that it had come at a terrible price. As David read, the ghostly figure of Samuel Holloway seemed to grow more insubstantial, his features growing indistinct. "You have found it," he said, his voice barely audible. "You must destroy the journal. Release me from this curse." David hesitated for a moment, torn between his desire to help Samuel and his curiosity about the journal's contents. But he knew what had to be done. He reached into his bag, took out a box of matches, and struck one. With a trembling hand, he set the journal ablaze. As the flames consumed the pages, Samuel's form began to dissipate, his features growing indistinct. He looked at David one final time, a hint of gratitude in his fading eyes, and then he was gone, leaving behind only a swirling mist that dissipated into the air. The mansion seemed to sigh with relief, its oppressive atmosphere lifting as though a weight had been lifted from its ancient shoulders. David felt a sense of peace settle over the place, as though the curse that had plagued it for centuries had finally been broken. With a heavy heart, David made his way out of the mansion, leaving it behind as the first rays of dawn began to creep over the horizon. He knew that he had been a part of something extraordinary, a story that would be told for generations to come, the story of the dead man's wish and the young man who had set his spirit free. As he walked away from the mansion, David couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. He had faced his fears and encountered the supernatural, and in doing so, he had helped a restless spirit find peace. The old mansion would no longer be a place of darkness and dread, but a place of redemption and release. But as he looked back one final time, David couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion still held secrets, that there were other stories waiting to be discovered in its shadowy depths. And he knew, deep down, that he would never be able to resist the call of the supernatural, the allure of the unknown. For David, the adventure was just beginning, and there were many more mysteries to uncover, many more ghosts to put to rest, and many more stories to tell.